Hi there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to yet another cracking installment of the Matt Brown Show. This is the Built in California series, where I'm shining the light on some incredible founders doing some amazing work and changing the shape and future of business and the world as we know it. With me on the line is the co-founder and CEO of Cloudmedx, Tashfeen Suleman. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matt. Glad to be on
So,
the show.
oh, it's great to have you here, man. So why don't you kick us off? What's the origin story to Cloudmedx?
Yeah, so we started the company in 2015. I was before that I was at Microsoft, and I have a computer science background. My When I was at Microsoft, I had a call at 3 a.m. in the morning letting me know that my father had a subdural hematoma, which is a head bleed, a brain bleed outside the brain region, and the reason for that was a misdiagnosis. So I flew out to meet with him. He was in a coma, and it took him, 7 days of being in a coma, and they had to do a head surgery to remove all the blood that had accumulated in his head. And so he made a full recovery, but that became the genesis story of the company. When I started talking to doctors on what happened, the theme was that there wasn't enough data and time to figure out what was causing his headaches, and therefore nobody thought it was serious enough to warrant a CT scan. And that misdiagnosis led to him going into a coma, and fortunately, fortunately made a full recovery. But that gave us a chance to talk to doctors, figure out how to solve this problem, just not just for my dad, but for millions of people that fall through the cracks. And so the idea was analyze data from these fragmented data points, put them together, create a longitudinal record, and then do analysis on who's high risk and low risk, so that action items can be taken by doctors and their care staff, so that similar incidents don't take place. So essentially, it became a tool to provide a second pair of eyes on your patient population.
So, Tashfeen, how big a problem is this? Like, very empathetic to the situation that you're in. How often does this occur?
So there's two problems here. One is the data fragmentation issue, which is as you're going to a doctor, you may be seeing doctors that are on different electronic health record systems. So you're leaving your breadcrumbs in different doctors' offices. And when you have a catastrophic event like my dad had, that data or the breadcrumbs don't trail back to create a full story. So it becomes very hard for providers and doctors to stitch the story together to figure out what the root cause of the problem is. So data fragmentation is one issue. The second issue is workflow automation. It takes a lot of people and manpower to manually look at records and create a story for that patient. I was reading a stat that for every 7 minutes face-to-face time with a doctor, there's about 42 minutes back-end work that happens where your nurse is scheduling a call, your doctor is looking at your record, your care coordinator is looking at your record, your claims is being processed. So it's a workflow problem. So those two problems are, a billion-dollar plus in terms of medical spend and operational inefficiencies that get added. And so it's a global problem. And now with the current economic situation where there's a recession looming and there's worker shortage and more patients are going to hospitals and clinics and there's not enough staff to keep the lights on, it's becoming a bigger and bigger problem.
hmm Tashfeen, I'd like to double click on the problem here and maybe start with the data piece. So when you say like there's not enough data, and we can happy for you to talk about the time aspect of it. What kind of data are we talking about? I mean, practically in the hospital, you would think that there's a lot of data. Most companies have too much data. They don't have what they can't figure out is what to do with it. And yeah, so maybe you could unpack that for us. Like when you say there's not enough data, what kind of data is it, and what are its
So
implications?
it's different types of data, but I don't think it's a shortage of data. It's a shortage of good data that is actionable. So when you go to a doctor, a nurse will take your demographics. She'll take your vitals. So it's your, blood pressure, your oxygen levels, your temperature. So that's sort of all your vitals. But then there's demographic data, where you live, your income, what kind of insurance you have, etc. And then there's your clinical data. right? Lab values, medications that you're on, prior history, family history, present symptoms, things you're presenting with right now, H&P, history and physical, etc. And then there's claims data, everything that gets sent to an insurance company for claims reimbursement and all that stuff. And then there's health, care plan data. What to do next? What's the care plan that the patient's going to be put on? What kind of treatments are we going to do? What kind of medications are we going to go give to the patient? Is there any, physiotherapy or surgery involved, etc. So those different kinds of data, although they go into electronic health records, but it's still very fragmented because in your care journey, you're not going to just go to one doctor. You're going to go to different doctors, and if you're acute and very sick with multiple chronic conditions, multiple medical issues, you go to different specialists. And usually those specialists are not talking to each other. So the problem then becomes you have good data, but it's siloed in different compartments. And usually those compartments and departments are not talking to each other. So when it comes to, now you're 65 and over, you have to look back at that history. And mostly the doctors are looking at what you're telling them as a patient. And that may not be accurate. So what's needed as a system, and different organizations, government level and private level, have tried to consolidate that data through HIEs, through insurance companies and others to stitch it together. But it's still very sporadic. You may have good population data for a certain county and state, but that may be missing in another state. So it's the effort is taking place, but it's not. There's no one solution that's out there.
So what you've built then is like a healthcare in a box. I've got your website up for everyone. So maybe before we get into the meat and the potatoes around like how your technology actually solves the problem, maybe give us just a broad overview. Like when you say this is healthcare in a box, what exactly do you mean, and what's in the solution?
So the ultimate goal for Healthcare in a Box is we give you one platform where you can aggregate data from various sources, whether it's coming from electronic health records, doctors' offices, insurance companies, labs, pharmacy, but then also government site data like SDOH and reporting data that different organizations provide. So you put it all together in one place, and that's what we call Healthcare in a Box. Now once the data is all in one place, you have one source of truth as opposed to chasing those different clinics, chasing those different hospitals to free up that data and give it to you to create a longitudinal or full profile for that patient. So that's what we mean by healthcare in a box. And the idea of the company is we aggregate everything into one place and then give you powerful analytics on a single patient, but also populations of patients to figure out where those patients are going to be clinically and financially, predictively in the next 6 months, in the next 1 year, in the next 5 years, so that you can take action on those patients and keep them healthy and keep them, from getting sick. So that's the overall idea. And we've done some good penetrations with certain states, with certain large health plans and certain large health systems to achieve that goal. But we're just getting started. There's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, the finish line is imaginary when it comes to startups and entrepreneurship. It's like there's no finish line. Even when you sell, like there's another thing coming, right?
There's somebody who asked me, where do you see your company? What is the vision of the company? And I say, well, I set a vision for 10 years. And then when I get to that, I set the vision for the next 10 years. So we're never going to be satisfied with where we are and what we're doing.
I know you're always in startup mode, right?
Right.
Cool. So basically, what I'm hearing from you, Tashfeen, is basically that you guys have built a kind of like a modularized system, and there's apps within the system that you can essentially subscribe to as a healthcare orientated business. You've got clinical, financial, operational, and patient experience. Could you maybe unpack those four modules or those apps for us a bit more? Like, how do they actually create value from an actionable intelligence perspective?
Yeah, so once the data is in that box, we've got, how do you use that data? And for the use of that data, we divided it into four departments. So clinical, operational, financial, and patient engagement. And there's a lot of thought process that has gone into that compartmentalization of data. So operations analytics, for example, will look at all the data and then tell you how your organization is doing operationally. Like, do you have more volume of patients and you need more staff, to deal with them, to cost of care? Like, do you have more volume of patients and you need more staff to deal with them, to cost of care? Like, do you have more volume of patients and you need more staff to deal with them, to cost of care? Like, do you have more volume of patients and you need more staff to deal with them, to cost of care? Like, do you have more volume of patients and you need more staff to deal with them, to cost of care? Like, if you're in a state and you have certain patients that require more specialty, so there's more high risk patients in COPD, for example, we'll provide you analytics from an operations perspective on how your cost of care should be, so you can better treat those patients. So that's everything into operations analytics. It also goes into operational improvements, workflows, what kind of triggers you need to put in place so that your hospital is not when there's a surge, your patients are not waiting for long hours to be seen by a doctor. So all of that goes into operations analytics. The second piece is clinical, which we call population health. Identify your high-risk patients, put them at the top, so that your care staff and team can reach out to them and connect with them and take care of them before they get sicker and sicker. So all of that goes into population health. The third piece is financial analytics on how do you deal with cost of operations and keep your costs low and your bottom line high. And as more and more organizations are going into value-based care, a lot of predictive analytics need to go in on on risk adjustments and proactively reaching out to the highest risk patients so that you can get more value out of those contracts. So that all goes into financial analytics. And the last piece is patient engagement, which is once you identify who your high-risk patients are, then how do you engage with them and make sure that they are on top of their medications, so medication adherence, how they're on top of their appointments, and how are they doing generally. And so between those four solutions, which are modular, they're all interconnected. So if you have a surge and you don't have enough staff, you're going to miss out on those patients. So that all is operational. That gets connected to the clinical, because that's where we identify who your high-risk patients are and how you reach out to them. That gets connected to the financial, because hospitals won't be able to keep their lights on if they don't have tabs on how the cost of care is going and where the finances of the company are. And none of the first three are useful until you reach those high-risk patients and engage them, because that's where change behavior takes place. So all those four suites of solutions are interconnected on the single platform that we provide. Now, most organizations would have one or two of those components already built in. And the modular approach of our platform is if you have two, then we can give you the 3 and 4. If you have 3, we can give you the 4th module as a bolt-on. That's where the modularity of the platform comes in.
So there's a couple of things I wanted to unpack there. The first one is this idea of value-based care, which I think is quite an interesting idea. What exactly is value-based care, and how is it different to the care that patients might have experienced 5 years ago?
Yeah, so value-based care is a very interesting model. Traditionally, healthcare has been fee-for-service, which is called FFS, where if you become sick, you go to see a doctor. The doctor has figures out what services he's going to give you, and then they bill for those services. Value-based care, what that means is an insurance company or Medicare or a government agency will contract with providers or a group of providers or a health system. And they would say, all right, we know you have 100 patients. Out of those 100 patients, some patients are more sick, some patients are less sick. And so we're going to give you a lump sum based on tiers of how sick those patients are. For example, for your top tier 10% really sick patients, we'll give you $100 per patient. I'm just giving you a number. For your lower risk patients, we'll give you 50. Now, with that tier, they will give you a lump sum or dedicated a lump sum of cost for those patients. And it's then your responsibility to make sure that all your patients stay within that cost. If they stay within that cost, then you get a bonus payout. And if you go over that cost, it has to come out of your own pocket. So then the doctors, the health systems, even the payers, it's their responsibility to make sure they keep those costs contained while not compromising on quality. So you have to keep high quality, keep taking care of patients, keep giving them a good member experience, but do it in a cost-effective manner. Because there was big research that went out that a lot of doctors were doing unnecessary MRIs and unnecessary surgeries because they were not needed. And the recovery times were high and member engagement was low. And so there was a lot of the healthcare spend was going out of control. So this was a way for Medicare and many insurance companies to keep providing high quality care, but do it in a cost contained manner. I mean, if you look at the healthcare spend right now, it's a GDP in itself. It's more than a lot of GDPs of other countries. So there has to be a way to keep the quality of care as the same, but keep it at a cost-contained manner.
Mm.
So that's where value-based care has come in, where you get incentivized for doing the right thing at the right time, and do it in a manner so that quality is not compromised.
Tashfeen, I was watching a Trevor Noah interview with Mark Cuban last week, and he was talking about Mark Cuban's, I don't know what you call it, like drug marketplace, not like Class A's healthcare marketplace. Let's just call it that. So it's basically called Cost Plus. So are you aware of it?
I am, yes.
Yeah.
It's an interesting concept that a lot of other companies are trying.
Yeah, so I've got it up on screen for everybody, which so I thought it was quite interesting because if you think about like this idea of value-based care, doing things at the right time, and so on and so forth, it seems to me like the industry, and I'm not talking more broadly about the industry of healthcare. It seems to me like they've been doing things the same way for a long, long time. And they haven't changed, they haven't innovated very much. Even things like medical recalls, for instance, like, the way that they handle recalls in hospitals is also like they send 100,000 FedEx mails to hospitals and different people receive them. And it's like confusing, misinterpreted. The communication structure in the supply chain is oftentimes broken. There's a lot of opportunity for startups such as Cloudmedx to come in here and do things the right way at the right time. So what Mark was saying was that he was telling the story about his one of his mates, his school friends, was paying $3,000 a month for some kind of drug for his health. And then Mark got his team to go to work, and they came back, and basically he pays now $63 per quarter. So it's $63 versus $9,000. So somewhere in that story, there's a huge systemic issue about doing things the right way, quote unquote. What do you see, on the ground, Tashfeen, talking to healthcare providers every day about, attitudes towards innovation within the healthcare space? Like, because, it's like people love talking about change, but they don't oftentimes actually want to change at all. So what's their attitude now towards innovative solutions like yours, for instance?
Yeah, I think that 30% of healthcare is very service oriented, and there's a lot of players in that service industry, and that's why you see those markups in procedures and drugs and any delivery of care, because from the time that care gets delivered to you from the hospital, there's a lot of places that care has to go through, a lot of administrators that play middlemen to get that to you, and that's where the price keeps getting marked up and marked up and marked up. And so one of the things that Mark Cuban is doing is direct contracting with pharmaceutical companies, and then removing those middlemen and providing you those drugs directly at a wholesale cost. And that's sort of a layman's example of how that takes place. And I think with the current economic climate, a lot of organizations are trying to do that through innovations, through automation, through AI, that remove the manual component of it and reduce the costs of care delivery directly to members or patients, so that those costs can be curtailed. And so the shift that we're seeing in the current climate is exactly what you mentioned. How can we continue to give members a wow experience, but do it in a meaningful and cost-effective manner? And one of the ways we think that could be done is through automation and through AI, and through to a certain extent moving to the cloud, because then you don't have to spend exorbitant amounts of prices on maintaining those systems internally. You can outsource it to companies that are more efficient in doing those things. So all of those costs, every little bit counts in reducing those costs and improving driving efficiencies. I'd love to give an example of we partner with a company that was processing, close to about 1 million records, a little under 1 million records of clinical data to extract meaningful terminologies from it and submit it for value-based care. It took them hundreds of people, multiple eyeballs, and multiple hours and days to process that data and get those reports out for value-based care. We were contracted to come in and use our natural language processing to process those clinical notes, extract the meaningful terms, put it in a report, and submit it. The idea was just look at the electronic health record data, extract the meaningful terms, put it in a report, and submit it to the authorities. Our NLP did that in under 12 hours. So imagine that with 98% accuracy. The humans were doing it in a few weeks' time, about a few weeks' time, and it was accurate, but it was a lot of eyeballs looking at that data, and our AI was able to do it in under a few hours, and get that at 98% accuracy, 99% accuracy, and submit. So that's where the power of automation can reduce a lot of manual processes. And keep in mind, a lot of these manual processes are being done by highly qualified people. These are nurses that have been trained to take care of patients, but they have to look at the electronic health record and almost become data entry, low-level data entry folks. So they don't want to be doing this. They want to be doing what they trained for. And so we're freeing up that staff to look at more patients and look at other things that are important for the hospital or the clinics, while the AI does the grunt work. And I've written about this in different co-ops and publications that I've done in the past, where I wrote an article in Newsweek that came out, and also MIT Sloan, for how automation can reduce that burnout and reduce that manual overhead, so that staff can be freed up to take care of patients, right? So a lot of those middlemen services can be reduced or redirected using automation. I think that's where the cost cutting is going to make an important impact.
So to echo your points, I think a lot of hospitals have worker shortages, and it's a business. I think people often seem to forget that a hospital is really a business that provides healthcare. So either you're making the money, or you're saving the money, or you're doing both. And then automation is a great way to reduce costs, as you touched on. But I'm curious to maybe double click on this idea of automation, because where do you start? Because there's obviously the obvious logical one, like, well, automate this manual process because you have 100 people, as an example you shared. But really, like, there's how many steps, how many processes, different departments, different people, different technologies, some new, some old, and an environment where ultimately the patient is centered to all of this whole discussion. So I'm curious to ask you this: like, how do you add more value to customers? Like, in the context of being more efficient, when you engage with a business or a healthcare provider, for instance, how do you figure out, like, the journey that they need to go on? What's that process, and what does it look like?
So we fundamentally believe, and that's the core thesis of our company, is technology is commoditized, and you cannot deploy more technology which adds more work to your customers and to your patients. Whatever you deploy has to improve efficiency, reduce the time to get things done, and do it in a manner that it reduces costs, while keeping high quality and wowing the patients, right? So I always tell our teams that we got to build things like the way Orbitz or Netflix or hotels.com, for example, have been able to wow your customers, where on a click of a button you can book a hotel or an airline, or get your Uber delivered. So that's the kind of experience you need to keep as your center as we drive innovation in healthcare. But it has to be done in a manner so that it doesn't add to more work and more complexity. And in order to do that, you need to have those network effects. You need to have those integrations built out with your health systems, those integrations built out with your payer provider groups, so that the data flows freely amongst your patient populations and amongst your clinical care staff. So the way to entry is, sit with your customers, listen to them, hear their pain points, and then create a solution that is custom tailored to them. Healthcare is not a cookie cutter. Most health systems that are even on the same electronic health system, their fundamental workflows are different department to department and hospital to hospital. So one solution fit does not work in healthcare. You're probably going to be 80% there, but the rest of the 20 or 30% has to be customized to the workflows and to the change behavior systems of those hospitals. So the way to get your foot in the door is to be flexible and nimble, listen to your customers, and just work with them.
And be collaborative, I suppose.
That's right. I mean, healthcare is a very collaborative industry, and you need to have all the stakeholders aligned as you're building out these deployments, and you need to get everybody involved, get everybody's buy-in before you have a viable solution.
Mm-hmm. Tashfeen, you guys were selected to be among the top 50 startups in the world's largest MedTech program. There was a press release that went out a few months ago. And this was an accelerator program featuring medical device, diagnostic, and digital healthcare technologies from around the world. There's a lot of startups that go into these accelerators. Some have great experiences, some don't. Some give away equity, some don't. I'm curious, I haven't heard of a MedTech Accelerator before. It seems to me like you're at the coalface of this MedTech innovation narrative. So I'm very curious to give our viewers around the world some insight into how does a MedTech Accelerator actually work, and what did you learn, or what were some of the outcomes that you realized as the CEO of Cloudmedx?
There's different accelerators, some that give you cash, some that take up equity, and some that require you to give them time. The MedTech Innovator was our goal to go there was not equity or cash or time. It was more to get into that cohort and then utilize how we could assist other companies and how we could get help from the cohort and the principals there. Now, the success or not success for a company when they go through these programs is more dependent on the company, how they can better use those resources to their advantage. And so we have a good team of engineers, sales, and architects that have been able to connect with the right folks within this program and make good connections. And then, it really depends on what the objective of the company is. But generally, it's the onus is on the company to figure out how do you best utilize the resources. And I think our team does a great job of utilizing what's available, and then just being very laser focused on what we want to do.
So when you met these other founders from around the world, how collaborative are other startups in the medtech space? Obviously, they're not solving the same problem, but they may be servicing the same customer. This idea that you touched on earlier on about the healthcare industry is very collaborative. We all understand why on face value. I'm curious to know from a network perspective, from an engagement perspective, how open and collaborative are other startups from the medtech category as part of this accelerator, in terms of like, well, hey, you guys solve this, we solve it like this. Well, hey, why don't we strike together a partnership? Was there much of that sort of thing happening?
Those things are certainly evolving, and these things take a little bit of time, but we fundamentally believe that healthcare is a village. No one company is going to solve everything. And the more we band together, the higher up the value chain we go. So we have identified good partnerships. We're working on closing them and driving value ultimately for the end customer. So those conversations are ongoing.
So, what does a good partnership look like? So, I spoke to the CEO, Clint Connell of Embrace, and they've got like this amazing innovative. It's called SmartWire. It's just literally like software that can program hardware. It's crazy, but like for the mouth. So it's an orthodontist type thing. They were displacing like the old, gross, sucky braces that that a lot of people around the world hated being put into their mouths. But he was talking about this intermediary channel, and it seems to me like, especially in the healthcare space, it's a constant structure, meaning you're the OEM, the hospital, like the OEM, and then you got these intermediary channel partners. There's providers of all kinds, hardware, software, etc., and then you got the patient. And so that's similar to the Microsoft ecosystem, where you have Microsoft distribution companies and then resellers. So this intermediary channel seems to be like it's a thing that doesn't go away, especially in very established industries, and it is a strategic enabler. So when it comes to partnerships, indirect or direct, what do you look for? Like, what does a great partnership look like, and what is your advice to other startups who are sitting in an industry which has this indirect channel when it comes to selecting partnerships so that they can start to scale?
We always keep our true north, which is how can we add more value-added components to our customers, which are health systems and insurance companies. So whatever adds value to our existing ecosystem would be a good partnership. Example is our customer. We're very customer centric and very customer focused. Many times our customers come to us and say, "Hey, can you build this? And can you help us solve this problem?" We're not going to be able to solve everything. So for the things we can solve, we know that there's a lot of companies out there that we can get on our platform or do a partnership with to solve that problem. So we are now reaching out a lot of those companies actively because we know that we have a customer that needs that solution. And so through that collaborative partnership, we can very quickly bring them online in that environment and serve a dual purpose, which is how can we use our customers and a partner to solve a problem together. And so we've signed partnerships like that where we go to solutions and go to market together with a net new solution that serves not only one customer's problem, but an entire segment that we weren't previously touching. So that's a success story for what we look in partnerships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great point that you landed there, Tashveen, because there's product selling, which is, hey, I have this, healthcare unit, like it's a whatever, like let's just say it's a blood pressure reading machine. And then there's solution selling, which is kind of like, well, you need the blood pressure machine, and then you need a training provider who will train all the nurses, at the hospital across the whole country. But then we're like, there's this training provider that only services New York or California. So we're going to bring this other training partner in who has a full reach across the whole of the US. And so now you've got multiple partners, right, selling a solution essentially instead of just a product, but collectively the value of what the solution is like 10x what just the blood pressure reader product would be on its own.
That's right. So if you look at an enterprise customer, which is a health system or an insurance company, they get bombarded by a lot of companies that we call vendors or solution providers. And many times you have the same solution being provided by multiple vendors. And so very quickly you have a vendor fatigue, which is now that you have to maintain that relationship and then everybody's touching data. So there's huge internal team that manages those vendors, and then you have a huge bloating effect that happens for an enterprise customer. So if there's fewer companies providing more solutions, that becomes an ideal environment for a customer to operate in, because then they have fewer vendors to deal with, and then that's where the costs come down as well,
Yeah.
as you're delivering care to your patients.
Yeah, it's such an important strategic idea, isn't it? It's like, well, you can either try and be an island on your own, or you can recognize that you're not everything to everyone. And actually, if you're playing in a specific segment or in a specific industry, like what partnerships can you procure so that you can create a point of difference, number one, but then also to lead. And I think there's a lot of startups that are just not thinking about, well, how do we lead? They're thinking about like how to get their first dollar, like or how to hit a certain run rate, like 100,000 MRR or $1 million ARR per year. And what they're not thinking about was, I actually do, like, if you a great product's not it's a great product's important, but it's not like as important as a great product with a great partner, who cares about the same problem or has a similar vision to you.
So I fundamentally believe that healthcare is an infinitum game. It never stops. What's hot now and what's needed now may not be needed down the road. So those four apps, the clinical, financial, operational, and patient that we have, those are apps that we call first-party apps that we've built, we maintain. But we have partnered with companies that have second and third-party apps, and that's what we're slowly activating and bringing on our platform. So we have enough that my goal is by early next year, we start announcing those partnerships. And those would be apps that serve things that we are directly not touching, but they're affecting our customers. For example, we're in the process of partnering with a company that does nurse staffing, right? So how do you use automation and AI to identify nurse staffing needs and then bring on board physical nurses to help with the staffing shortage for those hospitals and clinics? So staffing is something we're not involved in, but we're bringing a partner online that can help do that. So that's an example of a collaboration that we're doing to help solve a huge problem, which is nurse staffing in the industries.
Mm. Yeah, so for me, what I'm hearing is it's about there's this idea of short-term profit, but then there's long-term vision and growth. And I think oftentimes when you're in this early stage startup-y type vibe, where you maybe raised, seed or series A, you're not thinking about, well, what's my leverage? you know like where are we weak? Because if we can partner with this one, like, and it's interesting because I know this to be true because I talk to startup founders every day and I'm connecting them. I'm like, hey man, you guys do HR, you guys do something similar around coaching for career development. Get together and have a chat, because together I think you would actually have a better solution for the problem. And as you
You-
know, Tashfeen, it's like, as entrepreneurs, we're just in the business of problem solving, right? The bigger the problem, the higher the value, the more you
That's
get
true.
paid.
Yeah.
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 Go ahead. You wanted to raise it? Or do you want to jump in there?
No,
Or
I'm,
oh,
I'm
you're
just
done.
agreeing with what you
Oh,
were
you're just
saying.
agreeing. Okay.
It's
I love it
yeah,
when
it's
you
like I
agree.
said, healthcare is a village, and the more things you have, more tools you have in that village, the bigger things you can build and solve for.
Well, in Africa, they say it takes a village to raise a child.
I think that's everywhere in the world, not just Africa.
True story. So you spoke about vision earlier on. What is the vision that you have for Cloudmedx? Obviously, this is a personal thing that you had with your dad, as you touched on up front. So what's the vision? What do you intend to change at the end of this story?
I think healthcare is a fundamental right, just like food, shelter, and education. And I think healthcare is something that has become more and more expensive and getting more and more out of reach for a lot of people. I read a stat that it's one of the top reasons for bankruptcy in the US. So if you ever get cancer or have to get a surgery in an emergency, the costs are so big that some people end up losing their houses for it.
Mm,
So when you look at those stories, just quickly start to figure out that that doesn't feel like a fundamental right, right? There's something wrong in that story. And so whatever we can do, whether it's through automation, cost reduction, efficiencies, whatever we can do to reduce costs, I think it's going to become more and more democratized and more attainable for the average person. I mean, I have a lot of European friends, and they're always surprised to hear about healthcare costs in the U.S. because in Europe there's healthcare is free, but when they're visiting here, they have to have insurance because if something happens to them,
mm.
it's going to be all on their it's going to ding into their savings. So we want to make healthcare a basic human right in the US, and whatever tools we're developing, whatever partnerships we're building, that goal is right in center. How do we make the member experience better? How do we make the overall experience better, whether it's an enterprise or whether it's a consumer looking at tools? So that's the long-term vision, and it's you shouldn't worry about your healthcare if you're out of a job, for example, right? Because your insurance is tied to your income and your job. So how can we build things that can make it easy for policymakers and enterprise companies to provide that as a basic human right? And that's what we're striving for.
I love that. I love that. As an immigrant to the States, having been here 3 months, like trying to figure out like the healthcare story. Because I mean, like, it's amazing how like people, or is it like, dude, like one person even said to me, keep your hospital plan back in South Africa, because when you come to the US, like, it's a mess, you know. And to your point around income, like there is this gap in uh, the idea of it should be a basic human right, but then it's only if you earn a lot of money, like, you get the kind of care that you're looking for. And I'm really, really excited to see where you guys are going to go in 10 years' time, to see what kind of a difference you've made. But I want to have a quick bit of fun with you, Tashfeen. I'm going to give you the keys to the Map Round Show time machine, okay? And I want you to go. I know you're not like a 1-year-old company, but go back to to yourself on day one, right? And think about all the failings, all the learnings, all the successes, all of it, like the whole thing. And if you were to give yourself one piece of advice on day one, but go back in time, what's that one piece of advice you would give yourself about building Cloudmedx?
Would say that healthcare is like it's there's a lot of valleys and a lot of peaks that you need to cross, and but as long as you're linearly going, so as long as you're using it as a step function to go up the ladder, it's okay. There'll be a lot of ups and downs. Build those relationships and partnerships ahead of time so that you surround yourself with the right kind of advisors, the right kind of friends who will support you during your ups and downs of the company, and that's how you ride out the storm. When we started the company, we didn't have a lot of support, but we slowly built it, and that's what Silicon Valley is so great. When you reach out your hand, a lot of people will provide you that support that you need. So reach out early, reach out more and more, and if you don't ask, nobody's going to give it to you. So you just need to ask.
Oh, so glad you said that. I think it's such a difficult thing to do is to go, hey man, I'm actually having a shitty time right now and I need help, you know? And it's why I do the show, because it really does actually make a difference. It does not like, yeah, man, I'll get you, you and 10 other dudes. Like, it really does make a difference. And I think one of the things Billy Brush said to me is also based in Palo Alto. And he said to me, I asked him, what role has Silicon Valley actually played? And like, tell me honestly, like, what is it? Is it true or is it not? And he said, dude, it's like if you're in Silicon Valley and you go to like whoever it is, like a VC or maybe another founder, and you say to them, look, I'm gonna change the world like this, and even it doesn't matter how crazy the idea is, they will more than likely believe you because they are also in the same change the world boat. Does it make sense? Like they believe the crazy ones are the ones that change the world. It's what like Apple, Steve Jobs said, didn't he?
So, you always get empathy from other people who are going through that journey,
Mm,
and you have to experience it to build that empathy. I don't think you can build it without going through that experience. And so I think that's why there's a lot of that in Silicon Valley, because everybody is in the same boat as you are, and trying to build things, and it's not easy. Like building companies is incredibly hard. But once you build it, then you have to give back, or give it forward, in other words.
mm-hmm. Pay it forward. Love it. Tashfeen, let's wrap this up. Why do you do what you do? I mean, obviously, building a business, we all know building a business is like one of the hardest things. That and being a parent. It's probably the two hardest things you could do at the same time. Good luck. But why do you do what you do, Tashfeen? What gets you out of bed in the morning?
So it's we when my father got sick, our goal was to take care of one, and now we're doing that for millions of people. So that's what keeps me up at night. That's what motivates me and my entire team. We I can't talk about some of the new projects that we're doing, but we're doing some projects where the team is like, hey, I want to get on that project too because it's impactful. It's world changing, right? So that's what keeps us up at night, listening to our customers. And we went to a conference where a customer literally came up to us and said, "You saved our company, and the work that you did allowed us to stay ahead in the game." And that's what we want to hear. Um,
Amazing.
we built an algorithm that did early detection for something, and we made a press release about it. And in the response to the press release, we had patients coming up and saying, "I wish that this was there, 5 years ago, when we had cancer." And so those are the kind of things that are causes for celebrations.
Well, congratulations. It's great to have you on the show, Tashfeen. I think what you're doing is amazing. It's hard, and that's what makes it valuable. And how the healthcare profession and industry all around the world needs more of Cloudmedx and more Tashfeens at the end of the day.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Anytime. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.